Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Anchored Life podcast, where we share the stories of brave guests who have navigated life's toughest storms and learned how to thrive amidst hardship. I'm your host, Belisha Tang. First, a quick and important note. This episode of The Well Anchored Life explores deeply personal and sometimes sensitive topics, specifically surrounding mental illness and trauma. We want to be explicitly clear that neither the host nor the guest are licensed medical professionals or therapists. We are simply sharing our lived experiences and insights from our own personal journeys. This conversation is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out immediately to a qualified professional. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you. Alrighty, guys. This week we are thrilled to welcome Vega to the podcast. Vega is a 29-year-old para-educator who is also a passionate artist and writer. Today, she is sharing her powerful journey of self-discovery, from overcoming an upbringing that ignored her mental health needs to realizing her right to autonomy and clear boundaries. Vega is now a fierce mental health advocate, especially for youth, and is certified in youth mental health first aid. We'll be discussing the breakthrough moment in her life, the power of self-compassion, and how to model emotionally literate behavior. Please give a warm welcome to Vega. Hi, Vega. It's so great to have you here on the podcast today.
Hey,
Hey, how are you doing today?
doing pretty good. Had some tea before I came here. It had the lychee pieces in it, so it was good.
Oh, you mean boba tea?
Yeah, but I mean, I wasn't sure to call it that because it didn't have the boba pearls in it.
Oh, I consider that boba. Like any kind of
Okay.
topping. I love the lychee jelly. It's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, it
That's
was booming.
great. Yeah. Yeah. So, Vega, thank you for being on the podcast. So how we met, we were both taking this youth mental health first aid training, where we were taught in this, I think it was a 5.5 hour workshop through Zoom. We were taught how to identify signs and symptoms of mental illness or mental health conditions in youth, which I think is a really important thing, especially if your job involves working with kids, right? And that's kind of what you do as a what is it, a peer educator, right?
Um, well, they call it something different from company
Hmm.
to company, but like I do work with the students after school.
Yeah. Yeah. So you work with kids, and I've had experience working with kids as well. And I think one thing we learned in the training was a resilience factor of mental illness in kids, how they cope, is having at least one supportive adult in their lives. Right, having at least one
Yeah.
supportive adult figure who's there for them. And that's a big resilience factor that protects them and helps them cope with their mental health challenges. So
Mhm.
I really admire the work you do, and yeah. So we met in this training, and I just remember that we were blowing up the Zoom chat box. You and I, we were so into it. We were like asking questions, we were responding to each other. We were like, "Girl, I feel you on the stigma. It's so annoying," and all that stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is so passionate about mental health advocacy. And I am too. So that's what I wanted to talk to you mostly today on the podcast is let's talk about mental health and the mission being to destigmatize mental health and mental illness. And I
Mhm.
think the only way, or one of the main ways we can do that, is by having open conversations about mental illness and normalizing it and not being so scared to talk about it, right?
Right. Hmm.
Um, okay. So I identify as neurodivergent, and you also identify as neurodivergent. So we will talk about that. But before we go into all those labels, I want to hear about you. So tell me your story. Like, where were you born and raised, and what do you do now?
I was born and like partly raised in the Bay Area of California. Um, we moved a couple times. So like used to doing that, moving, going to different places, meeting people, all that. I do like to meet new people despite my challenges. Um, I like to create, I like to make art, do stories, role plays, things like that. Anything in the realm of creation. Um, I like
Amazing.
my stuffed animals. I like bugs, reptiles, just critters. I like being out in nature. Um,
Love it.
but like I try to keep things chill because I don't want to be doing too much and like be overstimulated.
Absolutely. Wow, those are some amazing interests, and I'm also a very creative person. So I think having creative outlets is really important as a self-care tool. And I love everything you said about being in nature and being around animals and insects, and just, you know, and would you say those things are some of the things you lean on for self-care?
Well, I don't know, being outside, like taking a walk is extremely good for me. That's
Yeah,
where I do my best meditation when I'm like moving. Like if I'm walking or on the bus or on the train, that's some of the best meditation for me.
amazing. Yeah, it's so healing being outside. I need to go on more hikes. That's one of my goals. Go on more
Yeah,
hikes.
hikes are good.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about mental health. So, self-disclosure for me, I was formerly diagnosed with bipolar disorder 7 years ago. So that's my particular diagnosis. Now, you told me that you self-identify with a mental health condition. So tell me about this mental health condition.
People tend to frown on self-diagnosis because they assume we're attention seeking or we're trying to like siphon money from the government, which is a really unfortunate mindset to have. But for the most part, when it comes to self-diagnosis, that's just for like, hey, I would like to know more of what I'm dealing with. If this is in fact what I'm dealing with, what do I need to know so I can live better with this?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, if you don't need to seek a formal diagnosis, that's great. But unfortunately, some people do seek it because they do need access to those resources. And unfortunately, you do need a formal diagnosis to get a lot of the resources. But I'm all right for now without mine. I just have to communicate to those who are willing to listen and accommodate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So your self-diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder. Is that what it is?
Mm, well, my psych was saying she definitely can see that. And then I had a different provider mention ADHD as well. So if I
Mhm.
were to like uh put one term for it, it would be AuDHD. That's what they call it when it's both of them.
No way. I didn't know that was a term. AuDHD. AuDHD. Oh, that is so interesting. Yeah, and it's totally common to have dual diagnoses,
Yeah.
having multiple things. Um, my formal diagnosis is bipolar, but in recent years, I suspect that I may be on the ADHD spectrum as well. And it's actually very common, you know. Um, so I have a little handy DSM pamphlet. So this is like a summary of some of the most common mental health conditions, and this is a very clinical definition of these conditions. So for people who don't know what ASD is, autism spectrum disorder or AuDHD, as you mentioned, um, I'm going to read out the clinical definition, okay, just for people who don't know. And then I want you to tell me what your take is on that, okay? So
Hmm.
here we go. Autism spectrum disorder. Persistent problems in social interaction and communication across a wide range of activities, including reduced ability to share emotions and interests and poor ability to communicate and understand both verbal and nonverbal cues and gestures. Also indicated by repetitious behaviors and patterns, insistence on sameness in routines, and fixation on restricted interests, heightened sensitivity or lack thereof to environmental sensory stimuli. Okay, so that's a DSM definition. So, how much of that resonated with you? How much of that can you identify with?
Oh, definitely the heightened sensory. That is like the for me, I think that's the toughest part of being neurodivergent because sensory encompasses like dealing with light, sound, texture, pressure. Um, did I skip any? Oh, tactile stuff. It's just a lot. Like sometimes the way my clothes feel on my body, like if I put a belt on and the pants bunch under the belt, that sends me into a rage. Not like a violent one because I know myself now. But growing up, that was hard because people didn't care. Like, hey, these clothes are literally making me want to rage. So like it's difficult to communicate that to people who don't have an understanding of sensory concerns. And with regard to communication, that definition is broad because not all neurodivergent people struggle with communication, especially if, you were undiagnosed for most of your life and you've been conditioned a certain way. Um, you kind of pick up on what some things mean based on context. And if you've got somebody kind enough to explain it to you, like I ask a lot of questions, and thankfully my close friends and support will answer them, but a lot of times people won't. So that's probably where the quote unquote difficulty in communication comes in, is for those that do not make the effort to communicate with people who communicate and process in a different way than most people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And the sensory stuff, I cannot identify with that, but I am sure that that must have been a challenge, and with regards to the communication, you're right. It's like it's important to surround yourself with people who are empathetic and understanding to communication differences. And I think it's really great that you self-advocate and ask questions when needed, but I think we live in a world where neurodivergence is not necessarily celebrated. I think these days there is more talk, more open conversation about mental health. It is trending in that direction, I think. But a lot of people, they may like conceptually have a very superficial understanding of what the diagnosis or the condition is, but they have no idea how to interact with a person with this condition. And it really depends on who this person is in your life, right? You would
Right.
hope that the people closest to you would take the time to educate themselves so they can be better support for you, right? And make these,
Exactly.
I don't want to use the word accommodations, but just be more understanding towards difference, you know? But
Yeah.
then if you meet someone on the street, it's like they're a stranger to you. They may not know you struggle with this condition.
Uh-huh.
And, part of it, this segues into my next question, which is self-disclosure, right? You know you have this thing. But one thing you told me, which really stood out to me, was you don't owe this information to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about why you say that. Because I agree.
Um, I mean, especially if if you've learned early on, hey, me talking about things that are important to me or could potentially be weaponized is not safe. Because sometimes it's your own people that are your biggest ops. So you learn quickly, hey, I'm not safe to talk about some of this stuff. So you get used to keeping stuff to yourself, which is not great for relationships or communication in general.
Hmm.
But you have to be selective, especially for something so important as like your mental health or, oh, I don't know, your brain chemistry. Because if you tell the wrong person, they start gossiping, they start talking about you. Then now you've created this unhealthy and unsupportive environment. It's like, yeah, see, that's not what we're about to do. So like when it comes to like I'll tell my close friends, like when I finally figured out that I was neurodivergent, it was funny because some of my friends were like, yeah, I knew that already. I was like, oh, okay. All right.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's such an important point to highlight that you would hope that the people closest to you would be supportive and understanding, right? But I think with self-disclosure, not everyone is safe when it comes to self-disclosure. Not everyone can disclose their conditions safely.
Right.
And it pops up in different contexts, right? Like, for example, for me with work environments, I do not feel safe to disclose my diagnosis to my bosses at work.
Right.
And if they happen to be listening to this podcast, then newsflash, I'm bipolar. But it's been scary for me because I worry about their perceptions of me. They may have judgment, stigma. They may think, oh, she's unreliable, or she's not going to be able to function and do her job well, so why should we keep her?
Mm,
Even if I have never given them a reason to doubt my capabilities in my
right.
work, um, I feel like in this world, like there still is so much stigma with mental health, mental illness, and neurodivergence, you know? Um, so yeah, self-disclosure. And one question I had for you was, and it's relevant to my personal life because I'm 27. I am currently navigating the dating pool. It is really ugly out there. Um, but I always wonder, like, when should I disclose my diagnosis to the people I'm dating? You know?
Honestly, that's a hard one
Yeah.
because unfortunately for all of us, there are some people out there that put up a front, like a facade. They want to quote unquote put their best foot forward. That doesn't work if you're trying to be in a committed relationship with somebody. You don't need to be putting on a mask because that's not who you really are. And you trying to conceal who you really are for under the guise so that I don't leave, that's just vile. We can't, there's no basis for a relationship with that type of attitude. But the thing is, people are afraid to disclose things that are important or, could be life-changing because they feel like the other person will leave. Like, okay, well, let them leave because if they cannot handle you being neurodivergent or any other health concerns you may have, then that it doesn't seem like that relationship is going to be, healthy.
Right. They have to accept you for who you are, all parts of you,
Right.
including the neurodivergence, which I really want to highlight that you are not your diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's something you have, right? But it's not who you are. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people almost over-identify with their diagnosis. That's definitely something I did, right? I was like, when I first was diagnosed, I was like, oh my God, I am bipolar. Not I have bipolar, but I am bipolar. And this is all I see now. It was every second of every day I was thinking about this, you
Right.
know? It
But I think
consumes, yeah.
because of like the language associated with because people will say that, oh, they're autistic or they're bipolar or they're schizophrenic, and now with when it comes to people first language, a person living with. And
Yes.
that's where we're trying to move to that language because this is before anything else, they're a person.
Oh my God, absolutely. I love that you brought up people first language. So that's basically language that puts the emphasis on who the person is apart from the label, right?
Hmm.
It's like, I have this, I am not this, right? I'm
Right.
not, this is not all of me. I'm so many other
Exactly.
things
Right.
besides this one thing, right? I love that. I
Hmm.
absolutely love that. Yeah. Okay. So, now talk to me about some of the challenges that you faced with your what did you call it? The AuDHD, right?
Yeah.
AuDHD. I know that's a label, right? But with any kind of neurodivergence diagnosis, whether it's formal or self-diagnosed, there comes with inherent challenges. Our brains work differently. So,
Right.
if you had to explain what life was like living with this condition, how would you explain it to people?
So, I mean, I've always known that something was a little different because everybody else is able to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm struggling. Like, they can wear their clothes normally, they can eat almost any food, and meanwhile, I'm having texture issues with the food. They can communicate just fine. Meanwhile, I'm getting called rude and disrespectful and accused of stuff I didn't do because I have a different communication style. So it's just, but the thing is, it's always some finger pointing like I'm the problem. It's like, no, I just process and communicate differently. So that's the biggest, I think, hurdle for me is because people are trying, well, they're not trying, but like it seems like people are committed to misrepresenting instead of asking. Because I like to ask instead of make assumptions because that's just not practical for anybody. But I really don't care for people making assumptions and not communicating. That is my biggest pet peeve is people that are unwilling to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just first want to say I'm sorry that you had to go through these challenges, and it must have been so difficult feeling alienated from other people, feeling not accepted, and being called like you are the problem. You
Hmm.
know, that's not a nice thing to say to someone or for you to feel that way. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I want you to understand, like, there's nothing wrong with you, Vega. Like, your brain just works a little bit differently than the so-called neurotypical, right? If we had to use that term, neurotypical, people who don't live with mental health conditions, right?
Hmm.
You and I, our brains just work differently, right?
Right.
And that term illness, mental illness, I also have a nuanced thought on that because illness implies that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Implies that there's some kind of deficit or some problem that needs to be fixed. And I'm not trying to minimize the fact that no, some diagnoses you need treatment to
Yeah.
function, to live a life that's healthy and stable and regulated, and that treatment may look like medication and therapy and lifestyle coping skills,
Yeah.
You just got to do what you got to do to thrive, you know?
Exactly.
But what's really painful that you mentioned, and I also relate to, is this judgment we experience from the external world, from people who don't truly understand. It can really make you feel like there's something wrong with you? So in these moments, how do you cope with that? What do you tell yourself?
Well, I mean, I've lived like that for so long. And then once I educated myself, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. Uh, I don't have typical thought patterns and processing. That's why neurodivergence, that term is used, even though in some cases it's said to be a misnomer because no two people think exactly alike. But the reason that that term is used is because it's a trackable deviation from what's typical. And that's why it became an umbrella term.
Yeah,
Because if it was just like one person, then that would just be, oh, that's just so and so. But because this is a trackable deviation, then it gets an umbrella term.
got it. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the term neurodivergence, it in the past used to apply mostly to people on the spectrum. Is that correct? And
When
then,
I,
mhm.
oh,
Oh no,
well,
go
when I
ahead.
first heard neurodivergence, I thought it only encompassed autism and ADHD. I didn't know it encompassed others. And then when I learned, I'm like, okay, all right, the explanation makes much more sense that it would encompass more conditions.
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense, right? Neuro, brain, divergent, difference,
Hmm.
brains that work differently. Yeah, so now I want to talk about this topic of medication. So you are currently on medication, right?
Correct.
To manage symptoms. And I remember in our previous conversation, you had said that medication is important, but it doesn't address the root issue of your condition. It helps manage symptoms, but it doesn't address the root issue. So talk to me more about that, what your thoughts are surrounding that.
Well, because of the uh HD part, or I can't, the letters are escaping me right now, but like the part that deals with executive dysfunction for many individuals, you do need a little chemical helper so you can, function because for some people being unmedicated leaves them in a position where it's extremely difficult to even do like their day-to-day routines slash demands. And I know for me, because of my neurodivergence, I am prone to depression and panic attacks. I do have to be on some medication so that I don't succumb to that because then Like, what am I doing? I'm just going to be in my bed all day, and that's really not great for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. I think I'm on medication too, and I used to have a lot of shame surrounding the fact that I had to be on medication to function normally, and but now I take my meds with gratitude. I'm like, the meds are why I'm here today. The
Yeah.
meds are what help me thrive, you know? They're what help me function, and live my best life and do what I do, perform in my work to the best of my capability. If I were not on medication, I'd be cycling through mood episodes. I'd be depressed and manic. I'd be totally unregulated, and it would just wreak havoc on my life.
Yeah.
Um, Bipolar is one of those things I think that you need to be on medication for because it's a brain condition. It's some kind of chemical imbalance. It's more than that, but um, now ASD, are most people on medication for that, or um, I don't know too much about that. So,
I guess it would depend on the severity of a particular symptom. They say ASD is a spectrum, but I see it more as a web because not everybody has the same collection of symptoms. You have some individuals that are nonverbal. You have some individuals that have a higher sensory sensitivity than I do. You've got some individuals that are hyperlexic. You have some that fall into the savant category. There's so many symptoms and so many severities. Um, so it would just depend on, the reason why they needed to be medicated. Like, are they like having panic attacks every day? Are they getting violent? Do they need just a little assistance focusing on stuff? It would just depend. So I
absolutely.
can't say for certain if most individuals with ASD are on medication or not.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. How people who are on medication, it's usually because the symptoms are bad enough that it's affecting their daily functioning. It's based on
Right.
like how big an impact is your condition having on your daily functioning, your ability to live normally, right? Um, but like you said, medication addresses symptoms, not the root cause. So if meds alone doesn't really do the trick for curing it, right? There's no cure, not for ASD or not for bipolar either.
Uh-huh.
What are some other strategies you lean on to self-regulate?
Well, in the beginning, when I first realized that I needed medication, that's exactly what I was looking for, something to just fix everything. That's not how medication works. That is to get you to a point where you can utilize other strategies to continue to cope and do the best you can. For me, my medication enables me to, basically get out of the bed and handle most of my demands, but it's not gonna like fix everything. What has helped for me is breath work actually. Diaphragmatic breathing has been my friend. That's very good. And I've also looked into like the reason behind fight or flight. And if you can activate your prefrontal cortex, that's like a higher level of thought, not the emotional part of your brain, like the logical part, start naming, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's how you do that. Or, maybe start reciting something, start writing something out. Because if you are able to activate those functions, then the body realizes, okay, I'm safe enough to do these higher functions. So let me just chill out. Let me chill out this adrenaline part, this fight or flight part. I'm like, okay, okay. So yeah, the breath work and education and also some self-compassion because unfortunately with the way I was conditioned, oh, you need to be productive 24/7. You need to prioritize other people over you. And I have found that not to be true. Like, I'm allowed to show myself compassion and I'm allowed to take breaks where it's necessary.
Oh, absolutely. Wow, so many golden nuggets of wisdom you just shared. Self-compassion, totally agree. That's something that it's a work in progress for me. And I think it's always going to be a work in progress when you mention like, yeah, your condition in our society, I think at large in America, we're workaholics. We're like productivity, productivity, goal achievement, but you have to be able to take care of yourself in order to achieve goals and do well in your work, right? I
Right.
think health is the number one priority. and having compassion for yourself when you have off days, when you have days where it's just a bad day and you need to take prioritize your self-care over everything else, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned breath work, and like my eyes lit up when you said that because I'm a yoga teacher and I also teach breath work and meditation, and it's really powerful. A lot of people think breath work is just, oh, whatever, but there's a reason it's so popular now. From a yoga standpoint, we have the prana, the life force energy, which is the subtle energy. And in yoga, they call breathwork pranayama. Pranayama. So you are manipulating the flow of prana in your body. And there's so many different types of breathing out there. You mentioned diaphragm breathing. I think that's something I teach my students as well. So breath work, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I heard about that. Can you explain that to people who don't know?
So it utilizes your senses so that you can ground yourself in the present and so that you can activate your prefrontal cortex. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it utilizes your sight, your smell, your touch, your taste, weirdly enough. But I mean, hey, if you like maybe eating some food, then that might work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think your hearing as well. I don't
Yeah.
know them all, but you start naming as many things as possible so that you can get like you can ground yourself to where you are and you can just calm that fight or flight down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't tried that much, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but I have heard of it. And I think that would be a really useful tool. Like when you're feeling so dysregulated, like your emotions are so strong that you don't even know what to do in that moment. You're just dysregulated. You're feeling really negative emotions, whether it's anger or rage or deep sadness. Um, then I think grounding yourself in the present moment and paying attention to what's around you, right? Mindfulness, basically,
Yeah.
is like present moment awareness in a non-judgmental way, just naming the facts and bringing yourself down. It's like also a form of distraction from your emotions, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good strategy. Yeah, I'll try that more often. Um, okay, well, this was a really productive conversation. And before we continue, because I do have a couple more questions for you, but what else do you want to tell listeners about destigmatizing mental health? Because that is why I really connected with you, Vega, was like I saw that you were so passionate about, advocating for people who are neurodivergent. So, what is a message you want to share with the world? Um, that very unfortunately is not totally accepting of neurodivergent people. What do you want to tell people?
Mm, I guess the biggest thing I would like for people to really take to heart is to educate yourself. You got to challenge those stigmas and biases. And it's easy to say it, especially if you've lived with certain biases for so long. But if you want to be able to communicate and connect with people, you have to be willing to challenge your preconceived notions and you have to be willing to educate yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of stigma is born from ignorance, right? It's like we
Yeah.
lean on stereotypes too much, and I feel like Hollywood and media at large just portrays mental illness in a really skewed way that is not
Hmm.
representative of the general population. Mental illness looks different in different people depending on how well they're managing it, right? And it sounds
Yeah.
to me that you are managing it really well. I see that. And I'm hearing about all the many things you're doing in your lifestyle to cope. And I think that's really admirable. Um, so yeah, educate yourselves. And I think a lot of people, let's say, they don't have any experience or exposure to mental illness. They don't have it themselves. They may not know anyone personally who has it, right? So in that way, they're kind of like, oh, then why do I have to learn about it? But I think
Hmm.
mental illness, just because it's not talked about that widely, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I guarantee
Right.
you, in the course of the life span in your life, over the course of your life, you will meet at least one neurodivergent person. So, how do we foster a more compassionate and understanding world is we can do our part by educating ourselves on how to make them feel more welcomed and accepted, as opposed to
Right.
living on the fringes of society or feeling this constant judgment from the external world. And a lot of it is also self-imposed, the stigma we feel, feeling deep shame for what we have. I went through that journey with bipolar. I, at one point, hated myself for having it, even though it wasn't my fault. And it's not your
Right.
fault either. So, what would you say to your younger self who was struggling and didn't really have a diagnosis or label to explain the things you were going through? What would you say to her now?
Mm, I would just have to let her know that she wasn't the problem. She was never the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Okay. So my final question for you is this podcast name is The Well Anchored Life. So how do we weather life's many storms and cope with it? Not only surviving it, but learning how to thrive amidst the hardships. How do you drop your anchor to stay grounded and stay regulated amidst life's many hardships? So, what do you personally do to stay anchored?
Well, when I'm not fighting for my life emotionally, when I'm actually having a good day, um, I make sure my physical needs are taken care of. And even though that may seem obvious, sometimes you just don't do that. Like you don't feel like it. But I know for myself, when I've actually eaten enough and I'm hydrated, got my vitamins, done my hygiene, I feel better about myself and life in
Mhm.
general.
Yeah.
So I try to, keep that taken care of. And then once that's done, I only do enough tasks that I have the energy and motivation for, and then I try to make time every day for something that I actually want to do and something that I actually enjoy doing. And then if I'm able to chat with my friends, I want to make time for that as well.
So amazing. Wow, I'm loving hearing this. These are things that I could definitely use more of in my life. Having what I'm hearing you say is having more of that balance, right? Making
Yeah.
time for friends, making time for things you enjoy doing, making time for self-care, taking care of your physical needs, right? Because that can
Hmm.
often fall to the wayside when we're
Oh
so
yeah.
obsessed with like our work or productivity, right? It's like screw
Yeah.
physical needs. No, it's very important. Mind-body connection, right?
Yeah.
Um, Question for you that just popped up. Because this is personally relevant is I haven't been eating very well. My diet, I've been trying to save money, so I've been eating ramen noodles. And that's, I know, I saw the look in your eyes. Um, and as a wellness leader, I know I'm totally not practicing what I preach, but I like that you mentioned get your physical needs taken care of. So, what does like your diet look like? I'm just so curious. Like, what kinds of vitamins and nutrients do you make sure you fuel your body with?
That's kind of funny that you ask because I'm really not the pinnacle of a good example either. Because of executive dysfunction, I do struggle to prepare food for myself if it takes more than 5 minutes. And where I live, we don't have a microwave. That's another story. But so sometimes to prepare food, it does take a bit more effort than I would prefer. And it's not even a matter of, oh, well, I just don't feel like it or I'm lazy because I know I'm not lazy. It's
Mm-hmm.
just sometimes the motivation is not there and people can misunderstand that, oh, she's on a hunger strike or she's dieting. It's like you didn't even ask me, you just made an assumption. But like I have been doing better lately. I try to get my protein
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately when you're dealing with low dopamine, you tend to crave protein because
Mm.
weirdly enough, that is a source of it. So I'm constantly craving protein. But especially if I have to leave the house and do stuff, it's unacceptable for me to not have eaten before I have to leave. And it's unacceptable for me to be going about my business in town or at home and not having any water. That's not okay. So I
Mm.
try to I keep like three water containers on my desk, my travel one, my home one, and then my mug, just to make sure I have water at any given opportunity.
Amazing. Wow, you're like the master of self-care. Like I get it. I'm doing like hydration challenge November. Like you know how November has all these challenges, right? Like no
Mm-hmm.
shave November or whatever. So hydration challenge November. It doesn't have the alliteration, but I am trying to hydrate more. And protein, so important, so important. I didn't know that there was a link between dopamine and protein. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that was funny when I found out, because I went on Google of all things. I was like, why am I craving protein so much? Google wanted to say something like, oh, you're low on dopamine. Gee, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And then I have a sheet that talks about different neurotransmitters and where you get them from. And under the dopamine one, it says to eat protein. Okay, all right then.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I remember in our previous conversation off this podcast, you mentioned that when you were first learning about your diagnosis, you were tracking everything, right? You were very vigilant about tracking everything. So what did that look like?
So even as a kid, I noticed certain patterns that I had that other people didn't really do. Now, mind you, I've got neurodivergent people in my family, but even as a neurodivergent individual, everybody's going to present differently. So I knew what my siblings and my family, how they, what their patterns were, and then I had to see what mine were. But I didn't start like tracking it until I decided to start advocating for myself and educating myself. And then once I knew what I was looking at, then it became easier to recall more, especially from childhood, because sometimes it was difficult for me to really track it properly because I also have a complex PTSD diagnosis and sometimes there is overlap. So I had to like, track hardcore to make sure, hey, is this a new onset symptom or is this something I've dealt with my entire life? And so writing all that out and organizing it has been very helpful for me.
Yeah. So you track your symptoms and when they arise. Is that correct? I did the same thing with when I was learning about
Well,
bipolar.
I mainly started tracking them.
Hmm.
hmm When
Yeah.
I mainly started doing that is because if I were to pursue a formal diagnosis, I would like for people to understand the timeline,
Yeah.
all the nuances of the things that I've been dealing with from childhood versus what I'm dealing with now.
Yeah. No, it's education is power, right? Self-knowledge is power. How can you treat a condition if you don't know how it presents? Right? And it's important, I think, that self-awareness, it's important for everyone, but especially for people with neurodivergence. I mean, your brain it controls consciousness, right? Your brain is what influences behavior and thoughts and feelings, So it's very tied to who you are, right? I also want to
Yeah.
say, like, the brain is an organ, so it's not all of you, right? Getting kind of spiritual here is like you are not your body, you are not your feelings, your thoughts, you are not your behaviors either. You are you, like your essence, your core. And these are things
hmm
that may be a part of you, but that's not all of you. There's a very yogic way of looking at the self. Um, Complex PTSD, do you want to talk about it a little more?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, so I didn't really understand what that was for a while because I knew what PTSD was, and I was able to low-key self-diagnose that because I knew enough about how it presented and and the timeline made sense because of what I had dealt with. The symptoms shortly following that incident, I'm like, no, these are PTSD symptoms. And so my providers have been helpful with that. And then I had to I had to educate myself a little bit more because I'm like, this isn't just regular PTSD. The what I'm dealing with, the nightmares, the intrusive memories and whatnot, that's stuff from my childhood. And I'm like, why is it getting haunting like right now? Like this doesn't make any sense. So then I found out about complex PTSD regular, shall we say, PTSD stems from a singular event. Complex stems from multiple. And I'm like, okay, that does make sense because I have been through multiple things. So that does make sense. So educating myself on that has been pretty helpful, so I can not let that anxiety and panic and paranoia like just overcome me because there was a point where I was like afraid to leave the house, and that's really not sustainable because I do like being out of my house, doing stuff with people, maybe after work outside of the house, go on other adventures.
Yeah. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. Complex PTSD, I have heard of it. I can't say I know too much about it, but it's like you mentioned, it's a little different than normal PTSD, right? It
Mm-hmm.
stems from a culmination of repeated trauma that
Yeah.
occurred over the course of a long time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not sure how deep you want to get into what you dealt with and what you faced, but you know, I just want to say I'm sorry that you had to go through that because no child deserves to go through trauma and abuse or what it may be, whatever it may be. I was just
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation with someone yesterday. I was like, we didn't have a say in whether or not we wanted to be born, okay, or put
Thank
on this
you.
earth, right? No
Mm-hmm.
one gave us that decision. Okay, like we were born, our parents gave us life. Cool. And then more than that, it's like we didn't have a choice who our parents were or what upbringing we were subjected to or what our socioeconomic status was or all these factors. It was not in our control,
Right.
right? Much less whether
Mm-hmm.
or not we got abused as children, you know? So this whole thing of like trauma and mental health challenges stemming from trauma, because trauma is a very big predictor of mental illness across the board
Oh,
for
absolutely.
multiple, if not all conditions. Um, it can feel very unfair at times, right? Do you sometimes feel like why me? Why did this
Well,
happen to me?
I try not to do that because it does happen to so many people. To me, it just seems illogical to say, well, why me? Well, why not you? Statistics and all that factored in. Why wouldn't this happen to you? Because we're all imperfect, and you've got traumatized people having kids and traumatizing them. Now, I may understand the reasoning behind why certain things happen, and sometimes I don't have the answers for that. But at the end of the day, I can't go back in time. All I can do is try to cope with what I'm dealing with now. But that does not negate the feelings that I have. I'm still to this day still grieving that I did not get what I deserved, still enraged at times because that wasn't okay, and I'm allowed to have those feelings, as long as I don't do too much, get myself admitted to the hospital or jail for that matter. But you can be aware of explanations, statistics, all the logical stuff, but you're still allowed to have feelings about it.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Feelings, I don't care what kind of feelings you're having, I think they're all valid, and giving yourself grace and self-compassion when you have those difficult emotions that surface, and having good coping skills to lean on when you do feel those difficult emotions arise and you feel
Mm-hmm.
dysregulated. Like you mentioned, like you can have thoughts and feelings, you don't necessarily have to act on them, right? You can sit with them, you can process them, you can turn to healthy coping skills to work through them. And that's ultimately the message of this podcast is like we all go through shit, right? And I think emotional regulation and, it's such an important skill. I think it's a challenge a lot of people face, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so learning those skills is really important to ultimately live a vibrant life. And I think all of us at the end of the day just want to be happy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we are the worst enemy to ourselves.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves from happiness for so
Mm-hmm.
many reasons, you know. Um, Vega, would you say you're a happy person now?
In general, but I mean, it's kind of hard to say because I've got my good days and my bad days,
Of
and it's
course.
very, very, sometimes it's really hard to recognize reconcile who I am on my bad days with who I am on my good days. And
Mm.
also because of my conditioning, I don't like always feel like I'm being real when I'm happy. But that's, conditioning and trauma talking, telling me that I'm not allowed to be happy or I'm stupid because I'm pretending to be happy. And I'm like, this is really vile. Like I'm allowed to be happy. I'm allowed to have good days. I'm allowed to have bad days. I'm allowed to have moments during the day where, some things might have gotten a little difficult and I'm allowed to be upset about it. Because unfortunately, emotions they do change and fluctuate through the day. And I didn't realize that until like after I started getting treatment for my conditions and whatnot. And I'm like, no, that's actually quote unquote normal for your emotions to change throughout the day. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
It's totally normal. Yeah, with or without a mood disorder, like, yeah, we go through a million emotions and thoughts throughout the day, but it's all a matter of controlling the chaos. I like to use that term, right? Control the
Hmm.
chaos, manage it, and you'll be fine. Yeah, so Vega, you're awesome. You're such an inspiration. I love to see people who are self-aware and basically, you know, dealing with things they didn't ask for and dealing with these challenges, but actually dealing with them because a lot of people they just either deny it. They're like, I'm fine. I don't have these issues. I mean, I'm laying in bed all day. I'm depressed, but no, I'm not going to deal with it. Or they're in denial. Yeah, they're in denial. They don't want to admit that they have a mental health condition because of stigma or fear of judgment, So, um, and some people just, another thing we talked about, and this is the last topic, is this hierarchy of needs and priorities of like, okay, how does self-care and mental health fit in the picture when we have our day-to-day responsibilities to pay the bills, to work, to hustle, There's a quote that I love, and it's a dog in the hunt can't scratch its fleas. So if you're in the middle of just trying to survive, like we all need to pay our bills, we all need a roof over our heads, we need to eat, and you're working hard to make money. How does taking care of yourself fit into that? I feel like some people think mental health and self-care is almost a luxury they can't afford,
Right, right.
and that's society talking, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really sad that in our society people think that that's optional. It's not. And history and science both prove that if you don't self-care, which may or may not overlap with your mental health, you're gonna burn out. You might even crash out, land yourself in the hospital or in jail because some people they use anger as their vehicle to release. But for me, I know because I burn out very easily, unfortunately. So I know myself. I know even like because I've been unemployed for a while. So even when I wasn't employed, I would be burning out if I had too much scheduled in a week or a month. There was like 3 months in a row where like my weeks were packed, and that was not working for me. So I find for me, I've got to keep things as simple as possible. That may mean I have to forego if I've got too many appointments scheduled, I'm gonna have to stagger them. If it's too many outings planned, I'll just have to pick the outing I want to go to. I gotta prioritize myself because I'm not of no use to myself or anybody else if I'm burnt out. And I know not everybody has that option, especially if you've got a family you're providing for. This is a difficult question because of the way our society is structured and with the way the wages and the cost of living are. Some people do have to work a ridiculous amount so they can provide for their family. And so in that situation, it would be a little bit or maybe a lot of it harder to simplify so that they could make time to take care of themselves and their kids. Because to me, it doesn't make sense to people like to say, oh, well, I've got to take care of my kids. I've got to do this and that. How are you supposed to do that if you're burnt out and borderline going into psychosis. To me, that never made sense. And what example are you setting for your kids that it's okay to run yourself into the ground for other people and never take care of yourself? Is that what we're doing?
Exactly. Right. Right. No, totally. And that's why in the airplane, right, they have that announcements like always put your oxygen mask on first before you help your kid, right? Because if you're not taking care of yourself and you pass out, right, how can you help your kid?
Mm,
So true. You are speaking truth right now. Well, Vega, time is up, but this was awesome. I loved our conversation, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on this podcast.
for sure.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
As we wrap up today's journey, a massive thank you for spending this time with us on the Well Anchored Life. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps other people find the show. We have new episodes dropping every Tuesday, so follow us on Instagram to stay up to date with new episodes and behind the scenes content. We appreciate you being here. Talk to you guys next week.